Have you ever looked at somebody else's behavior and thought, what is wrong with them? Maybe it was a teenager shouting in public, a care worker losing their patience, or a parent scrolling on their phone while their child cried. Today's episode is about judgment, why we do it, what it costs us, and how to replace it with something far more powerful: curiosity. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome back to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker. This episode might, I'm afraid, be uncomfortable, and that's okay, because it's one of the most important conversations we can have. So let's start with the truth. We all judge. We all have prejudices. We all make stereotypes. It's wired into us. In fact, social psychology tells us that the human brain forms impressions of others within milliseconds. It's a survival mechanism, categorized quickly to avoid danger. But in caregiving, education, support work, that instinct can go from useful to harmful very quickly. And we should all be mindful of it anyway in a day-to-day practice, because when we judge someone, we stop seeing them. We reduce them to a label, and once we've labeled someone, we filter everything they do through that particular lens. There's a phrase I love, which is, we judge others on their actions, but ourselves on our intentions. And sometimes the way that we judge moral events is sometimes based on an element of chance. You know, two people who, let's say two drivers, both speed, okay, both going over the speed limit. Unfortunately, one of them a child runs out and the child ends up being killed. Whereas the other happens to miss and no people run out in front. Now, how many of us have potentially then gone faster than the speed limit? But it's been okay because we only did it for this reason, that reason, the other reason. We didn't do it for any malice reason, but straight away, the person who ended up through chance, end up hitting somebody, straight away, do we attribute them to being a bad person for that action, for that outcome? And it was always a case of circumstances made it different. And a chance or luck changed the outcomes of those two situations. I remember one time when I saw a parent, I believed a parent, coming in with their teenage child. The teenage child had their hood up, seemed thoroughly disengaged, disinterested, sat down, didn't seem to be speaking, kind of got straight on the phone and things like that. Now, my instinct was not one of perceiving positive parenting. It seemed like a disconnection between the two of them. And I am guilty in that moment of also doing the same stereotype thing of look at that typical teenager. The hood being up and things like that meant they came across in a kind of a dismissive, uncaring, selfish, disengaged, potentially slightly threatening way. It wasn't until I overheard the mum actually saying, "Thanks for trying. I know how hard this is for you. I'm really proud of you." That changed my entire concept of what was going on. And it was a great reminder to be a better detective than judge. Because in that moment, obviously I'd put this label as typical teenager or thuggy teenager or whatever it was. But for all I know, based on that statement, something was going on deeper than I realized. Maybe that teenager suffered severe social anxiety, but had managed to come out with mum on this day. but was using the hood being up as a defense mechanism to stop any glaring eyes or make them feel a bit safer by being tucked away. Maybe they're going through a really tough time with their mental health, or, struggling with some bad things that had happened, and they were really struggling to come out at all, but they wanted to just come and support their mum for whatever reasons. I don't know any of that. I don't know what was and what wasn't true in this circumstance. But what I do know is that mum's very statement indicated that perhaps my preconceived prejudicial idea was not correct. So let's explore some of the psychology, some of the judgment traps that we can all be guilty of falling into and where it comes from. So there is one theory which is called fundamental attribution error. And fundamental attribution error is a psychology concept that we attribute others' actions to their character or their personality, but our own are down to our circumstances or to social environmental factors. So we attribute somebody else to being, well, he's rude, but whereas we go, well, I was tired on that day. The reason that they cut somebody off in traffic is because they're now really good and so-and-so who doesn't care about the people on the roads. The reason I cut somebody off in traffic is because I panicked and I was in the wrong lane and I just didn't realize where I was going and I thought I had more space. It's very easy to attribute the behaviors to others to who they are and make excuses for ourselves. It's because of what was going on. And this is a prime example that leads us to judgment of others. There is another element to this, which is also, once we've done that, they form a confirmation bias that falls into that process. So once we create that label, so let's say that person who cut us off was driving a particular vehicle type, for instance. Then we start to notice every time that same vehicle type cuts us off. And suddenly we then start labeling all people who drive that vehicle in the same way. And all evidence suggests, look, they're all like that because we don't notice the other car. If I take, for an example, just to make it easier, we'll use Audi. But please, any Audi listeners out there, there are good and bad Audi drivers, but it is just one of the common ones that gets referred to. So if I got cut off by an Audi driver, and then next time I get cut off by a driver, and then I notice it happens to be an Audi again, I'm suddenly going to start to notice more when it is an Audi than when it isn't. Even though there are other vehicle types that do cut me off, I'm going to potentially not notice them as much. So I'm more likely to notice the Audi driver. And because of that, then I start labeling and creating stereotypes that all Audi drivers are ... fill in the blank, whatever kind of that person creates in their head at that time. It means we then seek evidence to confirm what we already believe. This is perfectly normal, and it's a human nature because thinking or getting confirmation of what we already think is so much easier and causes less kind of discomfort. I teach this to my trainers all the time. It's so much easier when you have a group of students who all agree with you rather than a student who doesn't. It's just more comfortable to have everybody agree with you. It's more comfortable to have the Facebook feeds and the algorithms on your social media channels that support what you already think. It's so much easier to watch the TV programs that agree with your ideas rather than any that don't and go against what you believe. But that's what we should do. Watch the stuff we don't agree with to open our eyes up to objectives, objections and opposite ideas. But once we label somebody as lazy, aggressive and difficult, we're just going to find evidence to confirm that's what they are. There's another form of cognitive bias as well, other than confirmation bias. There's things like halo and horn effect, for instance. And these are prime examples of that millisecond judgment, that people who are perceived as societally better looking are also perceived or assumed to be more intelligent and more honest. Whereas people who have some form of facial disfigurement are more likely to experience negative judgments, that they're less intelligent or less honest. These are obviously wildly inaccurate. They are purely stereotypes and forms of bias. There is also a risk as well of dehumanization. In high stress situations and environments, especially in institutional environments or education, people become cases, risks or referrals, not individuals with stories. And I've so often found it that sometimes you'll turn up on shift and maybe there is an individual who experiences more challenges, more emotionally dysregulated, whatever it is. And sometimes the staff will kind of go, good luck, when they find out you're working with them. That label, that negativity is following them around like a bad smell without any of the, a bit like confirmation bias, any of the alternative being recognized and mentioned. So let's say we had a few situations. Let's say we've got a situation where the child repeatedly swears and staff in an environment label him as naughty. What's behind that behavior? A home life filled with chaos and unmet emotional needs, knowing how to cope with their own emotions. So either just suppressing them or only knowing anger as a way to cope and manage those emotions. Just coming from an environment where swearing is just a normal part of day-to-day language and they've never been told that they shouldn't, but now you're telling them they shouldn't and they don't really understand why. There's lots of reasons why that child might be swearing. It may not be the fault of the child. Let's say we had a young person with anxiety who avoids eye contact and refuses to speak, but teachers may perceive them as defiant. In reality, they're terrified about saying the wrong thing. So frustrating with some of the situations that I've come across where, some children are so terrified of getting in trouble because they need to ask to go to the toilet, and the anxiety of being turned down and being restricted that actually affects how much they then drink because they're scared of needing the toilet as a result of that. Let's say we've got an individual, a man who lashes out at his staff. His behavior record grows, but no one asks why he panics around loud noises until someone finds out he's undiagnosed with a particular condition like sensory processing disorder. But people were too busy judging his bad behavior rather than understanding where his challenges and difficulties were. And I remember dealing with numerous situations so many times where staff have wanted some kind of consequence for somebody who's lashed out rather than really exploring what was wrong for him. Let's say we've got somebody who's refusing to eat. And the staff of the environment assume that they're just being difficult and that they're just being picky. But it's grief. Maybe they're struggling to eat because they're going through a serious state. Their mental well-being is so low that their alarm bell, their fight or flight is kicked in, which means that the rest and digest are not working. If I'm seriously anxious, I don't tend to eat much food. So it's anxiety rather than just being picky. So what can we do? How can we improve and reduce the chances of us falling into this judgment trap? How can we slow it down even if we can't get rid of it completely? Well, first is we notice the narrative. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this person? What have I made up in my head? And what evidence do I have for this? So can we replace it with why they like that to, I wonder what's happened to them. I wonder what's going on for them. What's wrong for them? What might have happened to them? How are they feeling? What might have happened in the past? This shifts us over to that trauma-informed shift as well. It moves us from blame to understanding. Be mindful of your language as well. Words like manipulative, lazy, aggressive, attention-seeking. Try describing words instead. He often shouts when new people arrive. He seems to struggle when this is something he's finding difficult. Changing our narrative and communication can make a massive difference in how we perceive the information. But also don't forget to think about the positive attributions of somebody, not just those negative. Build curiosity into your everyday practice is so important. Always assume that every behavior that a person displays, there must be a benefit to it. That person who's rude and doesn't say thank you, maybe the benefit is staying silent feels safer than speaking up today. So, who have you written off in your mind lately? Who have you labeled as somebody that you don't connect with or that you don't like something they do? And what would change if you got really curious about their story? Thanks for tuning in to the Able to Care podcast. Let's not aim to be perfect, but to be open. When we replace judgment with curiosity, we don't just change how we see others, we change actually how we see ourselves. Please like, comment, and share. See you next time.